They looked at her cheap dress and laughed. They spilt champagne on her shoes and treated her like the help. For 3 hours, Alicia sat alone at the most exclusive gala of the year, ignored by everyone, including her old high school friends who pretended not to know her. They thought she was a nobody who had crashed a billionaire's playground. But they didn't know who was coming to pick her up. They didn't know that the man they were all desperate to impress was her husband. And when he walked through those doors, the silence was deafening. The invitation had arrived in a cream-colored envelope, thick as a plank of wood, with gold leaf lettering that shimmered under the kitchen lights. The annual Kensington Charity Gala. The Plaza Hotel, New York City. Black tie. Alicia placed it on the granite countertop, feeling a knot tighten in her stomach. It wasn't just a party. It was the social event of the season, the kind of gathering where fortunes were merged and reputations were either minted or destroyed over glasses of Dom Perignon. But for Alicia, it was something far more terrifying. It was a reunion. "You don't have to go," Alexander said, walking into the kitchen. He was dressed in a simple grey t-shirt and sweatpants, his dark hair still damp from a shower. To the rest of the world, Alexander was a ghost, a man who moved billions through tech infrastructure and silent acquisitions, but rarely showed his face on the cover of Forbes. He preferred it that way. Alicia sighed, running a finger over the embossed lettering. "Victoria will be there. And Bella. I haven't seen them since graduation." "Victoria?" Alexander frowned, pouring himself a coffee. "The one who made your junior year a living hell." "The very same," Alicia said with a dry laugh. "She's the chairwoman of the committee this year. If I don't go, she'll spin it. She'll tell everyone I was too ashamed of my life to show up. You know how she is. She thrives on the narrative that I failed." Alexander set his mug down, his expression hardening. He walked over and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Then go. Hold your head up high. You have nothing to prove to them, Alicia. You built a life. You're happy. That's more than they can say." "I know," Alicia whispered. "But we agreed to keep us private. If I go, I can't exactly wear the flashing neon sign that says, 'Billionaire's wife.' I want them to treat me with respect, because I'm a human being, not because of your bank account." Alexander kissed her cheek. "Then go as yourself. If they can't respect you for who you are, they don't deserve to know who you've become. I'll join you later. I have that conference call with the Tokyo board until 9. Promise you'll come? Try and stop me." 3 days later, Alicia stood at the entrance of the Plaza Hotel. The air smelled of expensive perfume and exhaust fumes. A line of black SUVs and limousines stretched down Fifth Avenue, depositing women in gowns that cost more than most people's cars. Alicia smoothed down her dress. It was a vintage piece she had found in a small boutique in Paris years ago. A simple, midnight blue silk slip dress. It didn't have sequins. It didn't have a train. It didn't scream money. To the untrained eye, it looked like something from a thrift store. To a connoisseur, the stitching was unmistakably 1950s Dior. But Alicia knew the crowd inside wasn't looking for quality. They were looking for branding. She took a deep breath and walked up the red carpet. The photographers, sensing she wasn't a celebrity or a known socialite, lowered their cameras. One even turned his back to check his phone. Alicia handed her invitation to the stern-faced woman at the clipboard. The woman scanned the list, her eyes narrowing behind thick-rimmed glasses. "Alicia, Miller?" the woman asked, using her maiden name. Alicia had kept it for professional reasons, and because she liked the anonymity. Yes, I'm on the guest list. The woman paused, looking Alicia up and down with a sneer that barely concealed her judgment. Right. Table 42. It's in the back, near the kitchen service doors. Enjoy your evening. Alicia took her ticket, ignoring the slight. Table 42. Of course. As she entered the grand ballroom, the noise hit her, a wall of laughter, clinking crystal, and a live orchestra playing softly in the corner. The room was a sea of tuxedos and glittering gowns. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the gold leaf ceiling. Alicia navigated the crowd, dodging waiters with trays of caviar. She was looking for a quiet corner to get her bearings when a shrill, familiar voice cut through the ambient noise. "Oh my God, is that Alicia?" Alicia froze. She turned slowly to see a group of 3 women holding court near the ice sculpture. In the center was Victoria. Time hadn't humbled Victoria. It had only made her sharper and more expensive. She wore a crimson gown that plunged dangerously low, dripping in diamonds that caught the light with every breath. Flanking her were Bella and Tiffany, her faithful lieutenants since the 10th grade. Victoria glided over, her eyes scanning Alicia's simple dress with predatory amusement. "Alicia Miller," Victoria cooed, stopping just close enough to invade Alicia's personal space. "I didn't think you'd actually come. When I sent the invite, I told Bella she probably can't afford the flight to New York. But here you are." "Hello, Victoria," Alicia said, keeping her voice even. "I live in the city, actually." "Do you?" Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Where? Queens? The Bronx? You must tell me which subway line you took to get here. It's so brave of you to navigate the city alone." Bella giggled, sipping her champagne. "And that dress, Alicia, it's so vintage. Did you make it yourself?" "It's an heirloom," Alicia said, not lying. "It's charming," Victoria said, patting Alicia's arm with a condescending pity. "Really, it's so brave to come here looking so destitute. It reminds us all of how lucky we are. Are you here to network? Looking for a job? My husband's firm is hiring receptionists. I could put in a good word." "I'm not looking for a job, Victoria. I'm just here to enjoy the evening." Victoria's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, bored stare. "Well, try not to get in the way of the photographers. We have actual VIPs arriving soon, people who matter." She turned her back on Alicia, signaling the conversation was over. "Come on, girls. I see the CEO of Nexus Tech over there. We need to say hello." Alicia stood alone in the middle of the ballroom, the heat rising in her cheeks. It was exactly as she feared. They hadn't changed. They were still the same insecure bullies, just with better jewelry. She found table 42. It was indeed next to the kitchen doors. Every time a waiter burst through with a tray of steaming filet mignon, the door banged against the back of her chair. The table was empty, except for her and an elderly couple who looked like they had been invited by mistake and were too polite to leave. Alicia checked her phone. 8:15 p.m. Alexander wouldn't be here for another 45 minutes. She considered leaving. She considered walking out into the cool New York night and ordering a pizza. But then she remembered Alexander's words. "Hold your head up high." She signaled a waiter. "Could I get a glass of sparkling water, please?" The waiter, a young man who looked frazzled, barely glanced at her. "Wait your turn, miss. I have to serve the head table first." He rushed off toward where Victoria was holding court, laughing loudly at something a man in a tuxedo was saying. Alicia sat back, gripping her clutch. She wasn't going to cry. She wasn't going to let them win. She was going to wait for her husband, and she was going to survive this night. But the night was about to get much worse before it got better. By 8:45 p.m., the gala was in full swing. The lights had dimmed. casting a warm, amber glow over the room. Elysia had managed to secure a glass of water from a passing busboy, but she hadn't eaten. The main course had been served, but the servers seemed to consistently bypass table 42, likely assuming the people sitting by the kitchen didn't matter enough to complain. Elysia watched the room from her exile. She saw Victoria moving from group to group like a shark in a reef. Victoria was charming, effervescent, and ruthless. She was currently hanging off the arm of a man Elysia recognized from the business news. Roger Sterling, a real estate mogul known for hostile takeovers. Elysia noticed something else, though. Victoria wasn't just socializing, she was desperate. Her laughter was too loud, her touches too lingering. She was hunting. "Excuse me," a voice said. Elysia looked up. A woman in a headset was standing over her. "Are you Elysia Miller?" "Yes." "We need this chair," the woman said briskly. "We're short a seat at the gold table for one of the donors. Since you're just a general admission, could you stand? Or perhaps wait at the bar?" Elysia blinked. "You want to take my chair while I'm sitting in it?" "It's for a platinum donor," the woman said, already reaching for the back of the chair. "I'm sure you understand. There are standing tables near the exit." Elysia felt a flash of anger. This was humiliation by logistics. She stood up, her legs shaking slightly. "Fine, take it." The woman didn't even say thank you. She dragged the chair away, leaving Elysia standing awkwardly by the swinging kitchen doors. Across the room, she saw Victoria pointing at her and whispering to Bella. They both covered their mouths, shaking with laughter. They had seen it. They probably orchestrated it. Elysia walked toward the bar, trying to look purposeful. She just needed a place to lean. As she passed a group of men discussing stocks, she heard a name that made her freeze. "Talking about Alexander Thorne," one man said. "Rumor has it he's in the city. If he shows up tonight, the donation pool is going to double." "Thorne?" another man scoffed. "He never comes to these things. The guy is a recluse. He sends a check and stays in his ivory tower." "Well, Victoria is convinced she can land him as a client for her husband's firm," the first man laughed. "She's been bragging all night that she has an in with his inner circle." Elysia suppressed a smile. Victoria had an in? That was news to her. She reached the bar, which was crowded. She squeezed in between two tall men in velvet tuxedos. "A Pinot Noir, please," she asked the bartender. "One moment," he said, looking past her to a man waving $100 bill. Suddenly, a hand slammed onto the bar next to Elysia's hand. It was Roger Sterling, the man Victoria had been flirting with earlier. He was red-faced and smelled of scotch. "Hey, sweetheart," he slurred, looking down at Elysia. "You look lonely. How much?" Elysia recoiled. "Excuse me?" "Don't play coy," Roger sneered. "Dress like that? Standing at the bar alone? You're working the room, right? I'll give you $500 to come sit with me and look pretty. My date is boring me to death." Elysia felt the blood drain from her face. "I'm a guest here. I suggest you back off." Roger laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "A guest? You? Look at you. You're wearing a rag. Who let you in? Security." He raised his voice, and heads turned. Victoria appeared out of nowhere, sensing the drama like a bloodhound. "Is everything okay, Roger?" Victoria asked, placing a soothing hand on his arm, glaring at Elysia. "This person is bothering me," Roger lied smoothly. "I think she's soliciting guests." Victoria's eyes widened in mock horror. She turned to Elysia, her voice projecting so the surrounding tables could hear. "Elysia! Oh my God! I knew you were struggling, but I didn't think you'd stoop to this. Soliciting at a charity gala. Have you no shame?" The room went quiet. The orchestra seemed to stop. Dozens of eyes fixed on Elysia, judging, disgusted, amused. "I didn't do anything," Alicia said, her voice trembling with rage. "He insulted me." "Roger is a respected donor," Victoria snapped. "Why would he insult you? Security! Please escort Ms. Miller out. She's clearly had too much to drink and she's harassing the VIPs. Two large security guards in black suits began to move toward Alicia. Alicia backed up, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked at the faces around her. No one stepped in. No one offered help. They just watched, glad it wasn't them. "Don't touch me," Alicia warned the guard as he reached for her arm. "I'm leaving." "You're damn right you are," Victoria hissed, stepping close. "Go back to whatever trailer park you crawled out of, Alicia. You don't belong here. You never did." Alicia turned to the door, tears stinging her eyes. She had failed. She had tried to be dignified, and they had crushed her. She just wanted to get to the curb, call an Uber, and vanish. She reached the massive double doors of the ballroom just as they swung open. But she couldn't get out. Because someone was walking in. A wall of flashbulbs erupted from the hallway, blinding everyone near the entrance. The chaotic chatter of the paparazzi outside roared like a wave. "Mr. Thorne! Mr. Thorne! Over here!" "Is the acquisition true?" "Alexander, one photo." A man stepped through the doors, flanked by 4 personal security detail, far more professional and imposing than the hotel bouncers who were about to grab Alicia. It was Alexander, but not the Alexander who wore sweatpants in the kitchen. This was Alexander Thorne. He wore a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo that fit him like armor. His presence sucked the air out of the room. He didn't look at the cameras. He didn't look at the crowd. His ice-blue eyes scanned the room with a terrifying intensity. The entire ballroom froze. The music stopped completely. Even Roger Sterling put his drink down. Victoria gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "It's him," she whispered to Bella. "It's Alexander Thorne." Alexander walked into the room, ignoring the waiters bowing to him. He looked angry. He looked like a man who was ready to burn the building down. The hotel security guard who was holding Alicia's arm suddenly realized who was blocking his path. He froze, unsure what to do. Alexander's eyes locked onto the guard's hand on Alicia's arm. "Let go of her," Alexander said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the silent room like a gunshot. The guard released Alicia as if she were red-hot iron. "Mr. Thorne, we were just removing a disturbance." "A disturbance?" Alexander repeated, stepping closer. He looked at Alicia, taking in her pale face, her trembling hands, and the unshed tears in her eyes. He reached out and gently took her hand, pulling her to his side. He kissed her forehead, a gesture of intimacy that shocked the room more than any shout could have. Then he turned to face the room, his arm wrapped firmly around Alicia's waist. "You are removing my wife," Alexander said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. Victoria dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound echoing in the dead silence. The silence in the grand ballroom stretched so tight it felt like it might snap. The orchestra, sensing the gravity of the situation, had ceased playing entirely. The only sound was the faint, nervous shuffling of feet and the distant hum of the city outside, a world away from the social execution taking place inside. Victoria stared at Alexander, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The shattered glass lay at her feet, a glittering mess that mirrored her composure. "Wife?" she finally choked out, the word tasting like ash. She looked at Alicia, the woman she had mocked for wearing a rag, the woman she had relegated to a table by the kitchen, the woman she had accused of being a prostitute. Alicia was standing tall now, anchored by the arm of the most powerful man in New York City. Yes, Alexander said, his voice calm but laced with a terrifying chill. My wife, the woman you just ordered security to drag out like a criminal. He turned his gaze to the security guard, who was now backing away, his hands raised in surrender. I suggest you leave my sight, Alexander said softly, before I decide to buy the security firm you work for and fire you personally. The guard didn't wait to be told twice. He turned and practically ran toward the exit. Roger Sterling, the man who had propositioned Alicia, was sweating profusely. His red face had turned a sickly shade of grey. He was a bully, but he was a bully who understood the food chain, and he knew that Alexander Thorne was the apex predator. Mr. Thorne, Roger stammered, holding up his hands. Alexander, look, it's a misunderstanding, a terrible mix-up. I had no idea she was with you. She wasn't wearing a ring. Alicia looked down at her left hand. She wasn't wearing her massive diamond ring tonight because she had wanted to be low-key. She had wanted to be accepted for herself. Is that your defense, Roger? Alexander asked, taking a step toward him. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, giving Alexander a wide berth. That you treat women with respect only if they are wearing jewelry you recognize. That basic human dignity is reserved for those in your tax bracket. I had a few drinks, Roger mumbled, looking around for support. But there was none. The people who had laughed with him 5 minutes ago were now studying the ceiling or their shoes. You offered my wife money, Alexander said, his voice rising just enough to carry to the back of the room. You treated her like a commodity. And then, when she refused you, you tried to have her thrown out to save your own fragile ego. I was joking, Roger cried, his voice cracking. It was just a joke. I don't find this amusing, Alexander said, calmly, as he reached into his tuxedo and withdrew his phone. And neither will the board of Sterling Enterprises. Roger's face drained of color. Alexander, wait. Don't drag business into this. It's a party. Alexander didn't blink. Business is always personal. You of all people should understand that. His thumb moved across the screen with deliberate precision. I've just notified my CFO. Thorne Holdings currently insures your 3 largest construction projects in Manhattan. Effective immediately, that coverage is being terminated under the Ethical Conduct Clause. Roger sucked in a sharp breath. You can't. Everything shuts down without insurance. I'll bleed millions by tomorrow. Then you'd better start budgeting, Alexander replied coolly, slipping the phone away. Or try borrowing from the people in this room. Though from the looks of it, you've exhausted that option. Roger spun around, desperation written across his face. Guests turned away, conversations dying as he passed. He was radioactive now. Broken. With a choked sound, he bolted from the ballroom, cameras flashing as his downfall was captured in real time. Alexander didn't spare him a glance. Instead, he turned toward the 3 women frozen near the ice sculpture. And now, he said, tightening his arm around Alicia, we address the hostess. Victoria forced herself upright, summoning a brittle smile as she stepped forward. Alexander, thank goodness you're here. Roger was completely out of control. We were only trying to protect Alicia. We thought she didn't belong. Security concerns, you understand. Her eyes darted to Alicia, pleading. Tell him. We were worried about you. It's been so long. We had no idea you'd married. So well. Alicia met her gaze and finally saw the truth beneath the makeup and bravado. Fear. For years, Victoria's voice had echoed in her mind, telling her she was small. Now Alicia understood. Victoria wasn't powerful, just noisy. She stepped away from Alexander. You weren't protecting me, Alicia said evenly. You humiliated me. You mocked my dress, laughed at me, and told me I didn't belong. You took my seat because you decided I didn't matter." I never said that," Victoria lied, looking around at the guests. "She's imagining things. Poor Alicia. She always was a bit sensitive." "There are cameras," Alicia said, pointing to the ceiling. "The hotel has security footage, and there are witnesses. The waiter at table 42 heard you. The bartender heard Roger." Victoria's smile faltered. "But that's not what hurts, Victoria," Alicia continued, taking a step closer. "What hurts is that, for 10 years, I thought there was something wrong with me because people like you didn't accept me. But tonight, I realized something. You didn't reject me because I was less than you. You rejected me because you're empty. You fill that emptiness with diamonds and galas and cruelty, but it's never enough, is it?" "How dare you!" Victoria hissed, her mask slipping. "You come into my gala, on my night, and lecture me. You're nobody, Alicia. Without him," she pointed a manicured finger at Alexander, "you are nothing." Alexander moved to step in, but Alicia held up a hand to stop him. "You're right," Alicia said softly. "I am nobody to you. But you're forgetting something about this gala, Victoria. It's a charity event for the Children's Hospital, a hospital that is currently struggling to build its new cancer wing." "Yes," Victoria sneered. "And thanks to my hard work, we've raised $2 million tonight. What have you done besides marry a checkbook?" Alicia smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. "Actually, I'm the chair of the board for the hospital. I was appointed last month under my professional name, Alicia Miller. I came tonight to see how the funds were being managed." Victoria went pale. "You... what?" "And what I found," Alicia said, her voice hardening, "was a party that cost $500,000 to throw, with only a fraction of the donations actually going to the children. I found a hostess who treats guests like garbage based on their net worth, and I found a committee more interested in champagne than charity." The crowd gasped. Whispers erupted like wildfire. "Alicia Miller? The mystery chairwoman?" "You can't be," Bella squeaked. "I am," Alicia said. "And as chairwoman, I have the authority to audit the event's proceedings and to veto the choice of next year's event planner." Victoria looked like she was going to faint. This gala was her identity. It was her power base. "But the twist," Alexander interrupted, stepping back to Alicia's side, "is that Alicia isn't the only one with a secret." He looked at the crowd, his face grim. "You all came here to impress me," Alexander announced. "You wanted my money. You wanted my attention. Well, you have it. But you're not going to like what I found when I looked into the finances of this charity gala." The atmosphere in the room shifted from social awkwardness to legal terror. The word finances, coming from Alexander Thorne, was enough to make grown men check their passports. Alexander signaled to one of his security detail, a man with a briefcase handcuffed to his wrist. The man stepped forward, unlocked the case, and handed Alexander a thick blue folder. "Victoria," Alexander said, holding the folder up. "Do you know what this is?" Victoria shook her head mutely. She was clutching Bella's arm so hard that Bella was wincing. "This is a forensic accounting report of the Kensington Gala Fund for the last 5 years, Alexander said. He opened the folder, scanning the first page. Alicia told me she was worried about the overhead costs. So, being a supportive husband, I had my team take a look this afternoon. He looked up, his eyes boring into Victoria. Imagine my surprise when I found that 30% of the donations, money meant for sick children, was being funneled into a consulting firm called V Events LLC. The crowd erupted. "That's a lie!" Victoria screamed, finding her voice. That's a consulting fee. For organizing the event, it's standard practice. 30% is not standard, Alexander countered calmly, especially when V Events LLC is registered to a residential address in the Hamptons. Your address, Victoria. Thief! Someone shouted from the back of the room. We donated $50,000. Another woman cried out, looking furious. It gets better, Alexander continued, flipping a page. Or worse, depending on your perspective. It seems that the catering budget was inflated by 400%. The company providing the food, owned by your husband's brother. The florist? Your cousin. You haven't been running a charity, Victoria. You've been running a family piggy bank. Victoria looked around, seeking an ally. He's lying. He's just trying to humiliate me because I was mean to his wife. It's a vendetta. She ran toward the man she had been bragging about earlier, the CEO of Nexus Tech. David, you know me. You know I wouldn't do this. Tell him. David, a stern-looking man with silver hair, stepped back from her as if she were contagious. If Thorne's analysts say the numbers are off, Victoria, the numbers are off. I want my donation returned. Immediately. Me too. And me. The room turned into a mob. These were rich people. They didn't mind losing money on bad stocks, but they hated being scammed, and they hated being embarrassed. Victoria had made them all accessories to fraud. I'm calling the police, a woman in the front row said, pulling out her phone. No, Victoria shrieked. Please, it's a mistake. I can explain. You can explain it to the district attorney, Alexander said. He closed the folder and handed it back to his guard. This file has already been sent to the NY State Attorney General's office. They should be arriving shortly. Victoria's legs finally gave out. She collapsed onto the floor in a heap of crimson silk and diamonds, sobbing uncontrollably. Bella and Tiffany, seeing the ship sinking, backed away, trying to blend into the crowd, pretending they didn't know her. Alexander didn't spare Victoria another glance. He turned to the room. My wife, he said, his voice commanding absolute attention, came here tonight in a dress that cost $50 because she wanted to see if the people in this room cared about anything other than money. She found her answer. He looked at the faces in the crowd, the people who had ignored Alicia, the waiter who had snubbed her, the woman who took her chair. This gala is over, Alexander declared. However, the fundraising is not. Alicia and I will be personally donating $5 million to the Children's Hospital directly, bypassing this fraudulent committee. Any of you who wish to save your reputations would be wise to match our donation directly to the hospital tonight. It was a challenge and a threat. I'm in for 100,000, a man shouted. 200, another cried. The checkbooks came out. Fear was a powerful motivator. Alexander looked down at Alicia. Ready to go? More than ready, she whispered, her hand trembling in his. Wait. The voice came from the kitchen doors. The young waiter who had ignored Alicia earlier burst out, looking terrified. He was holding a small tray with a single glass of sparkling water. Ma'am, Mrs. Thorne, the waiter stammered, running up to them. I have your water. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Please don't have me fired. I need this job. Alicia looked at the boy. He couldn't have been more than 20. He was sweating, terrified of the man standing next to her. Alexander looked at the waiter, his expression unreadable. You told her to wait her turn. You prioritized the people who treated you like a servant over the woman who asked you politely. I know, sir. I'm sorry, sir. I was just following orders from the head waiter. From Victoria. Alicia squeezed Alexander's hand. She didn't want blood. She wanted change. It's okay, Alicia said gently, taking the glass. Thank you for the water. You're not mad? The waiter asked, stunned. "I'm disappointed," Alicia said. "Next time, remember that kindness doesn't cost anything. You never know who you're talking to." She took a sip of the water, placed the glass back on the tray, and smiled. "Keep the job, but do better." The waiter nodded vigorously, looking like he might cry with relief. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am." Alexander guided Elysia toward the exit. The paparazzi outside were going wild, the flashes illuminating the night. But inside, the party was dead. Victoria was sobbing on the floor, Roger was ruined, and the elite were scrambling to write checks to cover their shame. As they walked through the lobby, Alexander leaned down. "I have one more stop to make before we go home. Do you trust me?" Elysia looked up at him. "Always." "Where are we going?" "To the kitchen," Alexander said with a mischievous glint in his eye. "The kitchen. You didn't eat," he said. "And I happen to know the hotel manager. I think we deserve a proper meal, and there's someone else we need to deal with." Elysia frowned. "Who?" "The chef," Alexander said. "He's the one who inflated the catering budget for Victoria, and he's about to have a very bad night." Elysia laughed, the tension finally leaving her shoulders. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Protecting you?" Alexander kissed her hand. "It's my favorite hobby." But the night wasn't quite over. As they headed toward the private service elevators, a man in a dark trench coat stepped out from behind a pillar. He wasn't a guest. He wasn't security. "Mr. Thorne," the man said, blocking their path. "We need to talk. It's about the merger." Alexander stopped, his body tensing immediately. He pushed Elysia slightly behind him. "This isn't the time, Vance," Alexander said. Elysia froze. Vance? That was the name of Alexander's estranged business rival, the man who had vowed to destroy Thorne Holdings. The man smiled, a cold, shark-like grin. "I think it is. You see, while you were busy playing hero in the ballroom, I was busy buying up the debt of a certain charity committee. Technically, I own this party now. And I have some questions about your wife." The man standing before them wasn't Vance. In the dim light of the service corridor, the shadows had played a trick. As he stepped fully into the halogen glow of the hallway, Elysia recognized him instantly from the business papers Alexander left on the kitchen table. Calloway was a corporate raider of the old school, a man who bought struggling companies, stripped them of their assets, fired the workers, and sold the empty husks for profit. He was the antithesis of everything Alexander stood for. "Calloway," Alexander said, his posture shifting. He didn't look frightened. He looked bored, like a man forced to deal with a persistent telemarketer. Preston chuckled, adjusting the cuffs of his Italian suit. "Charity is a tax write-off, Alexander. We both know that. But I'm not here for the gala. I'm here for the opportunity you just created." He gestured toward the ballroom doors, where the sound of panicked guests was still audible. "You just imploded the Kensington Gala," Preston said, a smirk playing on his lips. "Victoria is finished. The committee is liable for millions in fraud. And do you know who holds the promissory notes for the venue, the catering, and the event insurance? A shell company I acquired this morning." Elysia felt a cold chill. Preston had set a trap. "So," Preston continued, stepping closer, "technically, the debt that Victoria owes, she now owes to me. And since she can't pay, I own the rights to the charity's assets, including the land the children's hospital is built on. It was collateral in the original charter." Elysia gasped. "You can't be serious. That land belongs to the city." "Check the fine print, Mrs. Thorne," Preston said, his eyes sliding to her with dismissive arrogance. "The charity holds the deed, and I effectively own the charity now. I'm thinking of bulldozing the hospital. The land is prime real estate. Condos would look much better there." "You monster," Alicia whispered. "It's just business," Preston shrugged. "But I'm a reasonable man. I'm willing to forgive the debt and save the hospital. In exchange for one thing." He looked at Alexander. "The merger. Sign over the lithium mines in Nevada to Callaway Industries. Tonight." Alexander stared at him. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. Then Alexander started to laugh. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a deep, genuine laugh of amusement. "Preston," Alexander said, shaking his head, "you always were a checkers player in a chess world." Preston's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" "You bought the debt this morning?" Alexander asked. "From a holding company called Apex Liability Solutions?" "Yes," Preston said, his eyes narrowing. "How did you know the name?" "Because I own Apex Liability Solutions," Alexander said simply. Preston froze. "What?" "I knew Victoria was running a scam months ago," Alexander explained, his voice smooth and deadly. "I knew she would eventually crash. So, I set up a shell company to buy up all her bad debt. I wanted to control the fallout when she finally went down." Alexander took a step forward, towering over the shorter man. "So, when you bought that debt this morning, you bought it from me. And if you read the contract you signed in your haste to corner me, you'll see Clause 14B. Preston pulled his phone out, scrolling frantically through a document. His face went pale. "Clause 14B, Alexander recited from memory. "In the event of a conflict of interest or criminal investigation regarding the primary debtor, all assets revert to the original seller at a cost of $1. Alexander smiled. "Since I just exposed Victoria's criminal activity, the debt reverts to me. You just paid me $50 million for the privilege of holding a piece of paper for 6 hours. And now I'm taking the hospital back for $1. Alicia watched Preston's face crumble. The arrogance vanished, replaced by the sheer horror of a man who had just lost a fortune. You set me up," Preston whispered. "I just let you be yourself, Preston," Alexander said. "Greed makes people blind. Now get out of my hotel, before I call security and have them toss you out with the rest of the trash." Preston stood there for a moment, shaking with rage, but he knew he was beaten. He had been outplayed by a man who was 10 steps ahead. Without a word, he turned and stormed down the hallway, cursing into his phone. Alicia looked at Alexander, her eyes wide. "Did you really do all that?" "I told you," Alexander said, loosening his tie. "I don't like bullies, and I don't like people threatening my wife's hospital." He offered her his arm again. "Now, about that dinner." The kitchen of the plaza was a cavernous, stainless steel labyrinth. It smelled of roasting garlic, searing steak, and high-octane stress. Shouts of "behind" and "hot pan" echoed off the tiled walls. Alexander and Alicia walked in through the service doors, unnoticed at first in the chaos. At the center of the storm was Chef Gautier. He was a massive man in a pristine white coat, his face purple with rage. He was currently screaming at a young female sous chef who was scrubbing a copper pot. "Garbage!" Gautier yelled, throwing a towel at her. "You call this a reduction? It tastes like dishwater. Do it again. And if you waste any more wine, I will deduct it from your paycheck." The young woman kept her head down, tears streaming down her face, scrubbing harder. "Yes, chef. Sorry, chef." "And where is the lobster?" Gautier bellowed, turning to the rest of the line. "The guests are waiting. Why are you all so incompetent?" "Excuse me," Alexander's voice cut through the noise. Gautier spun around. When he saw 2 people in formal wear standing in his kitchen, his scowl deepened. "Get out! Gautier barked. "No guests in the kitchen. This is a workspace. Who let you in? Security." "I don't think security is coming, Chef," Alicia said, stepping forward. She recognized the dynamic immediately. She had worked in diners and restaurants to put herself through college. She knew a tyrant when she saw one. "I am Alicia Miller," she said calmly. "And this is Alexander Thorne. We're the ones who just shut down the party upstairs." Gauthier's eyes flickered with recognition. The news must have traveled fast on the staff group chats. His posture changed instantly from aggression to oily subservience. "Ah, Mr. Thorne." Gauthier wiped his hands on his apron, forcing a smile. "My apologies. It is so loud in here, I didn't recognize you. A tremendous honor. Are you here for a private tasting? I can prepare the chef's table immediately." "We're not here to eat your food, Gautier," Alexander said, walking over to the prep station. He picked up a container of caviar. "We're here to inspect the inventory." "Inventory?" Gauthier laughed nervously. "Mr. Thorne, surely you have people for that. My kitchen is impeccable. We use only the finest—" "Stop it," Alicia interrupted. She walked over to the trash bin near the prep station. She pressed the foot pedal, opening the lid. Lying right on top were several empty boxes. She reached in, ignoring Gautier's gasp of horror, and pulled out a box. "Frozen Atlantic cod," Alicia read the label. "Wholesale price, $4 a pound." She turned to Gauthier, holding the box up. "The menu upstairs lists wild-caught Chilean sea bass. That costs $40 a pound." Gauthier began to sweat. That is for the staff meal. We would never serve that to guests." Alicia walked over to the sauce station. She dipped a spoon into the pot the crying sous chef had been working on. She tasted it. "Truffle oil," Alicia said, shaking her head. "Synthetic truffle oil. Not real truffles. You charged the charity $5,000 for fresh shavings, didn't you?" Gauthier was backing away now. "You don't understand. The supply chain. It is very difficult to get fresh ingredients right now. We had to improvise." Alexander picked up a ledger lying on the pass. "Improvise," he read from the page. "It says here you billed the charity for 50 pounds of Wagyu beef, but I only see flank steak in the walk-in fridge." Alexander slammed the book shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet kitchen. Every cook, dishwasher, and server had stopped working and was watching the scene with wide eyes. They hated Gautier. They knew he was a thief and a bully, and they were watching him get cornered. "You're firing the staff," Alexander said, gesturing to the young woman Gauthier had been screaming at. "You're docking their pay for mistakes. Meanwhile, you're pocketing the difference between the cheap slop you serve and the premium prices you bill." "It's Victoria," Gautier shouted, pointing a finger at the ceiling. "She told me to do it. She said no one would notice. She said rich people can't taste the difference as long as the plating is pretty. She demanded a cut of the profits." "And you agreed," Alicia said. "You compromised your integrity as a chef for a kickback." "I have a reputation," Gautier pleaded. "I am a Michelin star chef." "Not anymore," Alexander said. "I own the hotel chain that manages the plaza, Gautier. Did you forget that?" Gautier's jaw dropped. You own through a subsidiary," Alexander said coldly. "And you are fired, effective immediately. Get out of my kitchen." Gauthier looked around at his staff. He expected them to defend him, or at least look sympathetic. Instead, the young sous chef looked up, wiped her tears, and smiled. The dishwasher crossed his arms and glared. Gautier ripped off his apron, threw it on the floor, and stormed out the back exit, muttering curses. Silence returned to the kitchen. The staff looked at Alexander and Alicia, unsure what to do. Alicia walked over to the young sous chef. "What's your name?" "Mia," the girl whispered. "Mia," Alicia said warmly. "That sauce you were making? It smelled delicious, even without the real truffles. You have talent." Mia blinked, fresh tears welling up. "Thank you." Alexander addressed the room. "Listen up. The party upstairs is over, but there's a lot of food left, and I'm guessing none of you have had a break in 8 hours." The staff nodded slowly. "We're not throwing this food away," Alexander said. "I want you to pack it up, all of it. The steaks, the desserts, the champagne. We're sending it to the local homeless shelter on 42nd Street. I've already called them. They're expecting a delivery." A murmur of approval went through the room. "But first," Alexander said, looking at Alicia, "my wife and I are starving. Mia, do you think you could make us 2 grilled cheese sandwiches? And maybe some tomato soup?" Mia's face lit up. "Yes. Yes, sir. I make the best grilled cheese." "And," Alexander added, raising his voice, "since the head chef position is now vacant, Mia, you're in charge for the rest of the night. Double-time pay for everyone on this shift." The kitchen erupted in cheers. The applause was louder and more genuine than anything that had happened in the ballroom upstairs. Alexander and Alicia sat at the small chef's table, a simple metal counter in the corner. 10 minutes later, Mia brought them 2 perfect golden-brown grilled cheese sandwiches and steaming bowls of soup. It wasn't caviar, it wasn't lobster. But as Alicia took a bite, sitting next to her husband, listening to the happy chatter of the kitchen staff, she knew it was the best meal she had ever had. "You know," Alicia said, wiping a crumb from her lip, "you were pretty scary back there with Preston." "I have my moments," Alexander smiled, dipping his sandwich in the soup. "But you were the real terrifying one. I think Gauthier was more afraid of you tasting his sauce than he was of me firing him." Alicia laughed. "The palate never lies, Alexander." "So," Alexander asked, his voice softening, "was it worth it? Coming tonight?" Alicia looked at the service door. She thought about Victoria crying on the floor. She thought about the check she had forced the guests to write. She thought about Mia smiling as she cooked. "Yes," Alicia said. "I think we finally closed that chapter of my life. Victoria doesn't have power over me anymore. She's just a sad memory." "Good," Alexander said, "because I have a surprise for you." "Another one?" Alicia groaned playfully. "I can't handle any more drama tonight." "No drama," Alexander promised. "Just a change of scenery." He checked his watch. "Our flight leaves in 2 hours." "Flight? To where?" "Well," Alexander said, "since everyone in New York now knows who we are, and the paparazzi are currently camping outside our apartment, I thought we might need a vacation. The jet is fueled. I was thinking, the Maldives? Or perhaps the Swiss Alps? Somewhere where the only ice is in our drinks, not in the sculptures." Alicia smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Take me anywhere, as long as I don't have to wear this dress." Alexander kissed the top of her head. "Done." But as they finished their meal, a phone rang. It wasn't Alexander's. It was Alicia's. She pulled it from her clutch. The screen flashed with an unknown number. "Hello?" Alicia answered. "Is this Alicia Miller?" a gruff voice asked. "Yes." "This is Detective Miller from the NYPD Fraud Division. We have Victoria St. James in custody. She's trying to cut a deal. She claims she wasn't working alone. She claims there's a third partner involved in the charity scheme. Someone you know." Alicia felt the blood drain from her face. "Who?" "She says the mastermind wasn't her," the detective said. "She says it was your sister." Alicia dropped the phone. Alicia stared at the phone lying on the white tablecloth, her heart hammering against her ribs. The detective's words echoed in the sudden silence of the private dining room. "Your sister." "I don't have a sister," Alicia whispered, her voice barely audible. She looked up at Alexander, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Alexander, I'm an only child. My parents died when I was 7. I grew up in foster care. I don't have any siblings." Alexander's face darkened instantly. He reached over and pressed the speaker button on Alicia's phone. "Detective?" Alexander said, his voice dropping to that low, dangerous register that terrified boardrooms. "This is Alexander Thorne. My wife is an only child. If Victoria is claiming she has a sister, she is lying to buy time." "Mr. Thorne," Detective Miller's voice crackled through the speaker. "We suspected as much, but Victoria provided documents. We have a birth certificate and a driver's license for a Jessica Miller. She's listed as the co-signer on the V Events LLC bank accounts, the accounts where the stolen millions were transferred." Alicia gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. "Jessica. Jessica was my imaginary friend." Alexander looked at her, his brow furrowed. "What?" "In the group home," Alicia explained, her voice trembling. "I was lonely. I invented a sister named Jessica to talk to. I wrote letters to her in my journal. Victoria. She stole that journal when we were roommates freshman year. She used to read it out loud to mock me." Alexander's eyes went cold. It wasn't just financial fraud, it was psychological warfare. Victoria hadn't just stolen money. She had weaponized Alicia's childhood trauma to create a scapegoat. "She kept your old data," Alexander realized aloud. "She's been sitting on this for a decade, waiting for a scam big enough to need a fall guy. She activated Jessica to pin the crime on you." He turned back to the phone. "Detective, hold her. We're coming down. And bring the fraud unit." The drive to the precinct was a blur of rain-slicked streets and flashing lights. When they arrived, the station was buzzing with the news of the high society arrest. Detective Miller ushered them into a darkened observation room. Through the one-way mirror, they saw Victoria. She was handcuffed to a metal table, her expensive gown ruined, her mascara running in dark streaks down her face. She looked small, desperate, and vicious. "She's trying to cut a deal," Detective Miller said quietly. "She claims Jessica masterminded the whole thing. She says she was coerced. We need to prove Jessica doesn't exist, or this investigation drags on for months." "I'll prove it," Alexander said. He turned to the detective. "Let me talk to her." "I can't allow civilians in the interrogation room, Mr. Thorne." "I'm not just a civilian," Alexander said, fixing his tie. "I own the digital security firm that handles your precinct's data forensics. If you let me in there for 5 minutes, I will get you a confession. Or do you want to spend 6 months chasing a ghost?" The detective hesitated, then swiped his keycard. 5 minutes. No physical contact. Alexander walked into the interrogation room with the lethal calm of a predator entering a cage. Victoria looked up, hope flickering in her eyes, expecting a lawyer. When she saw Alexander, she shrank back. "Where is she, Victoria?" Alexander asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Where is who?" Victoria feigned ignorance, though her voice shook. "Jessica," Alexander said. "My wife's sister. You say she's the mastermind. I'd like to meet her." She's in hiding," Victoria stammered. "She forced me to do it. Alicia knows. Alicia knows how dangerous she is." Alexander laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He walked to the table and slammed a folder down. It was a prop, empty inside, but Victoria didn't know that. "My security team just raided your storage unit in Queens," Alexander bluffed smoothly. We found the laptop you stole from Alicia 10 years ago. The one you used to open the Jessica Miller bank accounts. Victoria's face drained of color. And here is the problem with old technology, Victoria. Alexander lied, leaning in close. That laptop has a webcam, and modern forensics can recover activation footage. We have video of you, in your dorm room, opening those accounts using Alicia's stolen ID. It was a gamble, but Alexander knew his opponent. Victoria was a coward who relied on secrets. When the secrets were exposed, she had no spine left. Victoria slumped in her chair, the fight leaving her body. "I just wanted to be safe," she whispered, tears spilling over. "I needed a fallback. Alicia was always the victim. I knew if I used her name, people would believe she was desperate enough to steal." "So you admit it," Alexander said, his voice hard. "There is no Jessica. It was you, all of it." Victoria nodded, sobbing into her hands. "Yes, it was me. Just don't show the video, please." Alexander looked at the mirror. "Did you get that, Detective?" The door buzzed open. Detective Miller walked in, handcuffs in hand. "Loud and clear. Victoria St. James, you are charged with grand larceny, identity theft, and obstruction of justice." Alexander turned and walked out without looking back, leaving Victoria alone with the consequences of her own cruelty. On the other side of the glass, Alicia watched the arrest. Finally exhaling a breath she felt like she had been holding for 10 years. The ghost of her past was gone. And that is the story of how one woman's quiet dignity brought down an empire of lies. Alicia proved that your worth isn't determined by the price of your dress or where you sit at a party, but by the integrity of your character. Victoria had all the money and connections in the world, but in the end, she had nothing because she built her life on stepping on others. It's a powerful reminder that the truth always has a way of coming out, usually when you least expect it. If you enjoyed this story of justice and karma, please hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell.